Hello and welcome back to my workshop. It's not raining today, which is quite nice for this part of southern Scotland, so we won't be too bothered with the sound of the rain battering off the roof. In the last video we discussed the myriad human rights abuses that are taking place all over the world due to the actions of governments attempting to combat the effects, as they see it, of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. It's creating the COVID-19 illness. Today we're going to look at the raw data underlying the decisions of the governments. Specifically, we're going to be looking at death statistics from respiratory disease in England and Wales. We'll cover the period from 2010 up to week 42 2020, which is the latest data that's been published by the Office for National Statistics at the time this video was made. There should be new data coming out in a week or two, and I'll update this then. The Office for National Statistics, or ONS, which is much easier to say, is a government agency, which means that it's owned by the UK government, but it's separate from it. It's not specifically directed by the government. The ONS is a very good organisation. They do produce high quality data. I've worked for them several times in the past as a consultant, and I can vouch for the fact that they do have a lot of very high quality people there, and they do take very good care of the data that they collate and publish. I have no problem at all in placing trust in their data. Specifically today, we're going to look at death rates from respiratory illnesses. Only respiratory illnesses. That's things like pneumonia, COPD, emphysema, influenza, seasonal and otherwise, and any other coronavirus type viruses. So it's a wide range of illnesses, but it's all to do with respiratory ailments, and it's only those that we'll be looking at today. When trying to understand the behaviour of any kind of data, it's always very useful to have a look at the behaviour of that data in the past. So what we'll be looking at today are 5 charts which show the behaviour of respiratory ailments over the 11-year period from the beginning of 2010, and we'll be able to see any differences between the previous years and 2020. Now 2020 obviously has been the year of COVID-19, which is a respiratory ailment. It's a real ailment. It's not imaginary. The virus that causes it, SARS-CoV-2, is not an imaginary virus. It does exist. But it's a new thing. SARS-CoV-2 is a new one this year. So we should be able to see, if all of the publicity surrounding it is correct, we should be able to see quite a marked effect by the appearance of this novel coronavirus in 2020. So let's have a look at the charts. This chart shows deaths by week for weeks 28 to 42 for the years 2010 to 2020. That's 11 years of data, so there's 11 data ranges on here. You can see that it's a fairly uniform spread. It dips a wee bit in the middle of the chart, and then it tends upwards towards the end of the chart. And that is, as we're leaving midsummer and heading towards the autumn, respiratory deaths start to increase again, and we know that always happens. Which chart do you think, which line shows 2020? Given that 2020 has been publicised widely as being the worst year ever for respiratory deaths in Britain. It's not obvious from that, so I'll show you on this chart with the year numbers on, and you can see, in fact, 2020 is the one at the bottom. For most of this period, 2020 has had the fewest deaths from respiratory ailments of all of the past 11 years. For most of this period, for most of this 3 months period from the middle of the year into autumn, 2020 has had the fewest deaths per week of any year since 2010. And this is perhaps surprising given the amount of publicity there has been to the virus over this period. And you certainly wouldn't get this sense of the information, or the data rather, from the news coverage that we've had over the past few months. But the more astute of you will be saying, well, yeah, that's fine. That's a 3-month period. to get a better view, we need to know what the rest of the year was like. So are you hiding something from us at the beginning of the year? No, I'm not. And this is the data for all of the year, from week 1 to week 52 for every year up to 2019, and from week 1 to 42 for year 2020. And you can see that 2020 still hangs off the bottom of the chart from the period that I showed you earlier. And for the period before that, 2020 is pretty much in the middle of the distribution. There's nothing really unusual about the number of respiratory deaths in 2020, except that they're generally lower than all of the other years. And we can see this in the next chart, which is a cumulative graph of respiratory deaths by week number. This means that for each week we take the previous week's number and we add the current week's numbers. So the numbers in cumulative graphs always go up, and they generally have this kind of S shape to them. As you can see, there's a very gentle S shape in this. 2020 in this is now the red line, the red line with crosses, which is for most of the chart in the centre of the distribution. But then at about week 19-20 it starts to even out, and the line goes a bit flatter, and about week 41-42 it joins the bottom of the distribution. And this shows in total 2020 has had the lowest number of respiratory deaths since at least 2011, possibly the lowest number ever in that period. This is very strange. This does not chime with the narrative that we're getting from the news media, where everybody is dying from this highly dangerous respiratory ailment. Well, in fact, coronavirus can be dangerous, but for most people, in and of itself, it's not, as we can see from these figures here. As a respiratory ailment, it must be relatively mild, because it is not causing the huge numbers of deaths that we've been given to believe. There have been a lot of deaths this year. 2020 is not as unexceptional as these charts have shown. But to find out exactly why, we have to look elsewhere to other data. Well, there you are. We've seen from the previous charts that I've shown you that 2020 is not a particularly exceptional year for respiratory ailments. In fact, for a lot of the year, it's been one of the best ones to have a respiratory ailment, as the death rates from respiratory illnesses have been lower. And that could be the inference that you take away from this video, but it's not correct, and I will tell you that now. The reason that it's not correct is really it's an application of Disraeli's axiom that there are lies, damned lies in statistics. I have shown you very complete statistics and very accurate graphs for one particular range of deaths. 2020 has been an exceptional year for respiratory ailments, caused primarily by the new presence of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. We'll see the effects of that in the next video, where I can show you data which does show that 2020 has been a rather exceptional year. In the meantime though, I'll leave you with this chart, which is currently on your screen. This shows, as the previous ones I've had, all the years from the beginning of 2010 to now in 2020. And in this case, 2020 is the one which is very exceptional. It's the one which is hanging off the bottom of the chart. I'm not going to tell you what this chart shows you. You're going to have to look at the next video, but I think you'll be very surprised when you see it.